having me. As you said, we have done a number of times a spot-on panel over the years on a wide range of topics, but one feature has remained the same, and that has a panel in common with cyberspace, that there are no limits and no boundaries. So we talk about a wide range of topics. And we tend to be on the gloomy side normally. We are largely focused on threats and threat assessments. But I noticed that this year it's a little more upbeat, that we are also talking about the next big thing in artificial intelligence, in other areas of cyber, and we would like to focus on that today. And I'm happy to announce a stellar cast again of people with Sabine, if you want to might come up first. Hello. You're nearby from OHB, hello. The first publicly listed company in Germany on space and aviation, joined by Phil, who is coming. That's good to know. Hi, Phil. Who is obviously with Google Cloud, but previously he was also working for Goldman Sachs and basically protecting our financial system, hence our money, so that's good to know. And Christopher, of course, from Recorded Future, hello, in Washington, which is simply the largest intelligence company, which is pretty cool to say, actually. Yeah. So even if we are not focused only on threats, but let's start with you, and I'm sure you have discussed that incident today multiple times, but yesterday there was this digger operator here in Germany who damaged a few cables and basically shut down the entire airport for the entire day. So is that something you should laugh about, or is that something you should be deeply concerned about, because it shows that there is still a lack of understanding how vulnerable this critical infrastructure is?
No, but it's a good... This works? Good. So, you know, when we see those sort of things, we obviously always go cyber attack. And in fact, one of my colleagues in the room, I made that point to, oh, cyber attack. And this person said, whenever it's this sort of stuff, it always turns out to be a cable. And he was very right. And I think also so number one, and then Sir Alex made the point earlier about cables, and you know, we talk about Russia a lot here, and Googie, and what is it, 70, I'm not gonna remember their unit number now, I should, but the main directorate for undersea research in Russia, who knows everything about how to cut cables, and so cables are important. I guess that's...
Cables are important, but isn't it a little worrying that there wasn't a backup system in place?
I think, you know, as we see our world become more and more interconnected, I like to say that we're sort of at a 1% of where it's going to get. You know, in many ways, we may think that the internet is sort of done. No, we're at 1%. We're at 1.1% of where it's going to get. And the sort of criticality of or lack of dual infrastructure, you know, the single point of failures, maybe it's the right word, is I don't think we have any clue about how bad that is.
Phil, if we are determined to look at the bright side, it was mentioned in the panel before that the attacks from Russia that were forecast now during the past year or the year since the invasion happened, were not as bad as many people predicted. Was that primarily because the Russian attacks or Russian attackers are not as good as we thought, or is your defense system just so good?
Well, so I think, you know, we interestingly, some of you may have seen, we put out a report today between our Google threat team and our colleagues at Mandiant Threat Intelligence called The Fog of War, which analyzes that situation. In fact, you know, the Russian attacks did increase, you know, clearly against Ukraine and against NATO. I think also we've seen some fragmentation of Russian-aligned criminal groups that are you know, for want of a better phrase, breaking apart their allegiances because, as we all remember, attackers have bosses and budgets as well. And so there's only a finite amount of resources to go around in terms of doing attacks and actually achieving their criminal goals. And if their aligned masters are not supporting their profit-making objectives, there's going to be fractures in that. And I think we certainly see that. But just on the more positive note, well, I often describe myself as short-term pessimistic, long-term optimistic. Short-term pessimist because there's still a lot of bad things going on in the world, and there's going to be a lot more attacks, and more organizations need to definitely upgrade their defenses. One of the things we see a lot in cloud infrastructure is companies moving to the cloud to tap into that higher level of defense and resilience. And that's the reason I'm more long-term optimistic, is because we have a path forward to raise the baseline level of defenses that adjusts the economic cycle of attackers, imposes cost on them, which starts to tilt the dynamic in our favor. But interestingly, just kind of your point you just made about resilience is fascinating. One of the things that I too was impacted by the flights yesterday, and it must be my luck. I've had a few similar situations with.
More to come tomorrow.
Yeah, I've had a few similar situations with some of our nice, friendly US-based airlines. And the interesting thing is, it's one of the things that we have got to think about is it's not just a question of are those systems resilient enough and are they capable of recovery, but are they also capable of operating in degraded states? The thing that fascinates me is you have a system outage and it takes everything out. And why does it have to take everything out? You look at some of the ransomware events that have affected energy companies. There weren't ransomware events in their operational technology that controlled refineries and pipelines. There were attacks that affected their office systems. So why did the office systems have an impact on that environment? Why don't we have more isolation? And certainly something in, particularly hyperscale infrastructure we're very, very focused on is how do we assign boundaries and failure zones and security zones to reduce the effect or the blast radius of individual failures. And as we improve security, we've also got to think about how do we improve our ability to be resilient in the face of attacks, not just how to deal with the attacks themselves.
Sabine, to bring you in, it can be really annoying now to be stuck at an airport and to wait for a plane, but if something happens in space, it can be really crucial. And in the run-up to the invasion, and rightly afterwards, there are many reports on incidents in space, on satellites that were being attacked. How concerned were you and your company initially, and how concerned are you now?
So luckily, we haven't been really concerned directly. But since we have infrastructure, or we have our built satellites by our company, and for our engineers, it's every satellite that we build is a new kid of the family, and we have to take care of it until it leaves us forever. And forever is not going into space. It's more the time when it's going back from space to, if it's in the LEO, to Earth, so becoming a starlight, or if it's a GEO, to go somewhere else. But it really showed the attacks on the Violites satellite network, but also on the bright side, if you can say it in times of war, the use of Starlink. It really showed that space-based infrastructure is in not only talking about resilience, but really on talking about the ability to communicate. We cannot still, we are a global digitalized society, and we rely on cables. And we have learned that this is not a good idea. We have also, yes, we have also seen and learned that that the gentlemen's agreements that we all thought that everyone is relying on, like we are not invading, we are not having an invasion into Ukraine. It's not really something that is still a fact, and therefore it's also the Outer Space Treaty saying there's no militarization of space. I think that I don't want to say that we have to really overthink this, but we have to stop being naive about it. And therefore, we do not only have to think about how to protect our assets in space, we have to think about also more resilience in space, and we have to think about how to save the infrastructure that is needed on the ground. Because if you don't have access to space, if you don't have launchers to bring satellites into space, there's very much emptiness in space, but also you cannot operate satellites if you don't have a ground infrastructure.
Phil, I was glad to hear that you're a long-term optimist. Is that partly because after the violation of that gentleman's agreement a year ago, did we see a new push for more cooperation between private actors and government agencies to really invest in cybersecurity?
So I think that there's been a long-term strong relationship in many geographies between the public and the private sector to share information about threats and vulnerabilities, again, to work as fast as we can to resolve these things based on observed intelligence. One of the things I think that while we often talk about the importance of the public-private partnership between governments and private sector, I think we also need to remember that most of the work that happens every single day is private-to-private relationships through constructs like information sharing and analysis centers, through various other things that happen in and out of various national and sector-specific certs. And the most important thing, and I think this is something that has been transformed and continues to be transformational, is industrializing information sharing. There's a history of where information sharing between organizations and between public and private sector was a bit artisanal. It was kind of, craftsmanship based and individuals sharing information with each other. What we're driving towards now is the industrialization of this process so that we can make sharing and the response to the sharing of those threats more real time. I kind of like to think about what we're doing as well, wiring up the planet as a digital immune system so we can detect one attack in one place and quickly upgrade or respond to that in all places, again, imposing cost on the attack.
Agree with that, Chris?
Yeah, no, I would agree, and I would say you came from the financial markets. Think about the way we talk about public-private information sharing. To be honest, it's ridiculous the way it works today. It's I will say that. Imagine if you're going on the stock market and said, I want to buy long Google, short Goldman. And the way that I would get the information...
That's exactly what I did.
No, so I would use or long Goldman, short Google, and I would want to get price discovery for that. I want to get the stock price. And now I'm going to go out and do some public-private information sharing to get the price. Do you imagine how... This sounds ridiculous. And nobody would be able to, to trade on that. And number two, it would be incredibly dangerous from dangerous actors taking advantage of this stuff every single second. And that's, what politicians have been talking about for 30 years, public-private information sharing. Boom. No, so you need principal actors who take ownership of the problem. So in financial markets, Bloomberg does that, and we model our company to be the Bloomberg of cybersecurity. So, and then now you could also imagine you had other sort of constructs, but Bloomberg is a great example of doing this in the financial markets, and there are similar examples in pharmaceuticals. And
how can that really be? Because, largely Bloomberg and even your company is still a profit-driven enterprise. You're not doing it pro bono, right?
No, but I think it's a tough problem. And so, you could imagine having governments doing it. So, for example, in pharmaceutical adverse events to drugs, very important. If you guys take a drug and there's a problem, that gets reported. The U.S. government has taken on itself to develop this AIR system, adverse event reporting system. And they will, even if it happens in the deepest parts of China, they'll take that data, aggregate it, and turn it into a great data set that any one of you can download and analyze. And so it doesn't have to be Bloomberg, it could be a government sort of thing. But the one thing it cannot be is public-private information sharing. It's just stupid.
So that is stupid, but it's public-private partnership particularly...
Trying to be controversial.
No, that's fine. In space security, is that something that you have experienced over the past years evolving or not?
Yes, it is evolving. So from my perspective, public-private partnership, especially if it's taking place in Germany, it's...
So there's no excitement then.
Yeah, it's a little bit complicated, but to be optimistic as well on short-term as on a long-term basis, I think there's always room for improvement. So... especially in space, I think that public-private partnership has more opportunities because everything you do in space is dual use. And therefore, there are no borders, and therefore you can also share more information. Because if you collect information, especially, for example, you're a private operator of your own Earth observation constellation, like, I don't know, we know all from the news, especially since the invasion into Ukraine, from Maxa or from, I don't know, other private companies. And the public-private partnership can also be that the private company sells the information, the picture, or the service to the government. And from my perspective, this is a good example of public-private partnerships. if you have public-private partnerships already in building the hardware, or then it could be a little bit more complicated, because then you have always a government or an institutional customer who is.
But if you say, Sabine, that is particularly touchy often in Germany, and that the partnership is more, building this partnership is more complicated than other countries, have you seen the often quoted Zeitenwende, the turning point in that area as well now over the past year?
So what the Zeitenwende has brought us is the Zeitenwende and the war, that we are talking much more about space as an infrastructure, as a critical infrastructure. We are talking much more as well in Germany as in all other European countries, and especially in the European Union, about how do we have to build up our military infrastructure in space. We have more information, and we see more upcoming business or needs in terms of safety and security in space and from space, which is not only the military use, but also how to deal with space debris, how can we protect our infrastructure in space, and how can we protect our planet Earth from space, as it's not. So you have asteroids, you have not man-made space debris, but if you really want to break it down on what is written on paper about how to spend the budget that is coming from the Zeitenwende, there it's much more saved for other dimensions, not really space.
Now we look to the challenges from the past, but let's look forward. Many people were in awe of what happened recently on artificial intelligence, and it has really changed the equation for many again. When you look at it, Phil, from your professional perspective, do you see the rise or the constant improvement of artificial intelligence as a threat overall, or as a real opportunity to improve things?
No, so I mean, we've been investing massively in artificial intelligence for the longest time, and it's embedded in many of our products, and it achieves great cybersecurity effect every single day. So for the nearly 2 billion people that use Gmail every day, artificial intelligence is protecting you against malware, phishing, all sorts of spam, various different links that may take you to unwelcome websites. That's AI has been the engine behind that cybersecurity effect for many years, and I could talk for 5 hours about all the places we've applied and embedded AI. I think, over the past couple of years, with the research into transformer models that was created at Google that led to the creation of these large language models, I think we're also seeing the classic dual use issue where these things are going to be immensely useful for defensive purposes, but they're also going to lead to many other consequences we have to deal with. One of the things we've been very, very focused on, the responsible, safe and ethical use of AI, and making sure that we think about the consequences of using this technology and introducing and managing it in appropriate ways. But we're very, very aggressively always looking at the opportunities for AI to act on the defensive front. And it's just proven highly advantageous on the defensive front for the past many years, and it's going to continue to do that.
But aren't you a little concerned that artificial intelligence is going to help a competitor to basically compete with you in a much more challenging way?
Yeah, no, we're always observing competitors all the time and everything, so I don't particularly worry about kind of things that hallucinate regularly. So I think we have to think about how do we continue to provide capabilities to people that's the most useful for their job at hand, and delivering accurate results that they can rely on is very important. And similarly, on a cybersecurity front, applying artificial intelligence for a defensive mission to keep giving us defensive advantage over attackers and driving the costs up for attackers is just part of the equation we've been dealing with for the longest time.
Should Google be more concerned because artificial intelligence is going to change the equation?
No, look, Google is incredible at artificial intelligence. We've had a lot of fun with this. So we, for example, in Ukraine, we're deployed in 12 or 13 agencies over there, and I think we get in like hundreds of thousands of images every day now, sort of from, and not sort of in the cyber domain, but more in the physical domain. And so now you get very interested, can I beat a human at detecting Shahed 136 drones versus Shahed 131 drones versus these sort of things? And so we've announced a big collaboration with the Ukrainian government on building call it an intelligence dome around critical infrastructure that has a cyber element to it, but also a physical element to it. And you can imagine use these sort of techniques there in ways that you're not going to have a human be able to do it because of just sheer volume. And so, you know, and then we should be careful about, you know, dual use, absolutely. But no, there's some pretty incredible stuff you can do. At the same time, and it's exciting, you know, I'm a nerd, if that doesn't come through. I'm a nerd, and so you get very excited about stuff you can do. At the same time, you know, it's still data analysis. I started doing data analysis in 1991, and if you don't know the problem you're gonna solve, it doesn't matter which sort of technique you pull out of there. There's still no magic. You've got to know the problem you're gonna solve and all those sort of things, so.
And it's been interesting as well. I mean, I think people forget, with the latest focus on these particular generative AI models, that AI is just embedded already in every part of every sector around the world. We work, for example, with a number of large financial institutions where we're successfully using AI to apply for anti-money laundering, to mitigate terrorist financing, to mitigate many other things, and it's enabling them to have massive increases in accuracy, lower false positives and false negatives. It increases the productivity of their workforce. That's just one. We do other things with pharmaceutical companies on drug analysis. We do things with every sector. And that's AI today is a big part of the machinery of every part of society. And the great thing about it is that introduction of that has been done in safe and responsible ways where we're able to validate models, explain in many cases the results of what's happening, and be able to put them in the constraints of the appropriate risk-managed structure of those businesses. And doing that going forward to get the best out of AI in a responsible and safe way is the most important thing.
Sabine, is that too rosy a picture of AI in your point of view?
To be honest, it's not really my specific field, and of course we are also working with that. And of course, AI is important for space companies. But honestly, I don't think that we are already on that level that is discussed right here. Because I'm really exciting on what you are talking, and
cool.
Yeah, it sounds pretty cool, and it's very much information in a very short time.
Well, we have time for a few questions. So who would like to be first? Maybe you can introduce yourself briefly and your question was a question mark, ideally.
Hi, my name is Lucio. I worked for the United Nations for several years, also in cybersecurity. So the question is, why was Starlink so successful in Ukraine? And was it because it came from a private partner? Because official other methods of communications could not be deployed? And do you think Musk should continue providing it?
I think Fedorov, the minister who bought it, was just all in. He's great. He's 31 years old and just very, like, with him, procurement is fairly easy. It's fast. It's like things rock, and he just goes. And that sort of mindset to things, plus technology that is obviously good, you know, you can imagine in pretty much the other 199 countries on the planet, that would have taken about 5 years before that got deployed. So I will give a lot of credit to the good Fedorov, Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine. Incredible guy.
You were about to respond to.
Yes, I think that one of the key factors was that it was there and it was available. None of the other telecommunication constellations are on that level of ambition right now. I also think that Elon Musk did a very good, it might be very good marketing, but he has sent the terminals very fast and very cheap to the Ukrainian user. And it showed that at least we have to have a resilient way of communication. And although we have the opportunity to have the classical satellite communications as we know it from military use, the Starlink idea, or the idea of having communication constellations in the LEO orbit, that also provides broadband. And this is, I think, also one of the keys. It's no longer only, or it's no longer between broadband for broadcast, or do we communicate, but it's only the internet. And therefore, that's, I think, also very important why Starlink has been such a key factor for how the Ukrainians were able to communicate. I don't think that it's me to say if Elon Musk should or if Starlink should be provided to the Ukraine any longer or not. But I think that what really happened, it showed that especially Europe has no own competence in that, and this is why Iris Square, which is now officially also has been decided by the European Parliament. So this will be the European telecommunication constellation, so from the institution, and this should bring the service that Starlink now provides to Europe and to the world, since it's a worldwide constellation, but it's the customer or the service is provided by the European Commission.
But I'll really emphasize, I think it's great you bring up the Musk point, who being sort of he's a doer. And then you have Fedorov on the other end. You sit down with him and he pulls up his phone and says, do you want to create a company? Like, yeah, I'd like to create a company. This is exciting. And he hits his phone and boom, you have a Ukrainian company. You create a Ukrainian company and bypass, lawyers. And he's like, and by the way, when we do this, we actually remove a lot of ability for corruption. Blah, blah, blah. So it's like, and you put that obviously in the context of war, now they can move fast. And I think probably for a lot of us in this room, this is a good lesson.
So if you want to start a company in Ukraine, do it now. You're next. I think a microphone is coming. That's maybe easier.
You've been talking about communication satellite, Elon Musk. When it comes to protecting the communication on those lines, actually, could you give me your take on what the quantum computer challenge or threat would be? And one little bit more specific on that, I would like to understand, of course, also the US take when it comes to quantum key distribution against post-quantum encryption. If you could be more specific on that.
Yeah, so just kind of a bit of background on the question. So, clearly, everybody's watching the development of quantum computers, and the real threat on the horizon is the availability of what we would describe as a cryptographically relevant quantum computer that's of sufficient scale to be able to break much of the public key cryptography that's vital for many of the key exchanges and other secure communications. I've no kind of crystal ball as to when such a computer will come about, but the one thing I would say is it's moved from the domain of physics to the domain of engineering, and if there's anything taught us over the past few decades, engineers can always work quicker than we ever expect them to do. So I think I would range the availability of such a quantum computer to be in the 2035 range, but that could be more, it could be longer. There's still some fundamental challenges on quantum error correction and other things to be able to kind of realize such a computer. But we can't wait, and so one of the things that NIST, particularly in the US, have already announced the post-quantum cryptographic algorithms. We're hoping that the standards of how they'll be used are released next year, and we would expect that many companies like us are going to be fast implementers of that to get ahead of the quantum threat. We've already been trialing quite extensively these algorithms in our infrastructure. I don't have objective data on this, but we think we're one of the largest implementations, if not the largest, of some of the PQC algorithms in our infrastructure, layered on top of the existing cryptographic infrastructure to test performance. But one of the things I would say is we're encouraging all organizations to start planning for this transition, because it's going to take a long time, and it's a little bit like a Y2K problem. You've got to go find these things and fix them and replace them. On the quantum key distribution piece, one of the things is we're not so positive on that. I think the quantum key distribution itself is not necessarily a viable replacement as a tactic for mitigating the risks of quantum computers, just because of the deployment challenges. Also, there's been substantial security weaknesses in its implementation. So we're all in on post-quantum cryptography, less so on quantum key distribution.
We have exactly 1 minute left. So one brief question to each of you with the I'm asking for a brief answer. Starting with you, Phil. What keeps you up at night now when you think of the future of cyberspace?
So there's one thing, and I'm kind of almost phrasing it as a negative. So I think the biggest opportunity for us all to resolve cybersecurity issues is to modernize our technology platforms. I think if we can invest as much in modernizing away from legacy systems where the security isn't built in, it's bolted on after the fact, if we can get a modern, more defendable architectures where the security is built in, not bolted on, that's our tremendous opportunity. And anything that gets in the way of that modernization to get to more defendable architectures is not a good thing. The faster we can get to that, the better.
Sabine, even briefer maybe.
So for me, I think that cybersecurity is it's very close to space and security from space and security in space. And therefore, I agree with Phil that we have to really look at our technologies. We have to develop new technologies, and we have to be brave enough to leapfrog wherever it has to be done. And we have to stop saying it's all based on our experience.
Yeah, no, so I made the point that we are sort of 0.1% into connecting the internet really into our lives, and it's going to get in here. Another one of Elon Musk's companies, for example, is working on getting a computer into your brain. So I think we know a lot of software vulnerabilities, like 300,000 of them. Let's start enumerating the human vulnerabilities in the brain and thinking about what it means to actually attack those. That will be a little bit of a different challenge.
That's probably the topic for next year. Thanks so much to the fantastic panel, and thanks to you for listening.